Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, CEO of Collaborative Compositions, and today I've got with us Sumner Lee, CEO, founder of Fuse. Sumner, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Chelsea. Thanks for having me on. My name is Sumner Lee. I am the founder and CEO of Fuse, and we are a defense tech company. We build and deliver network solutions for military platforms, for aircraft, for unmanned systems, and for ships.
Interesting. Very broad topic. Very, very broad. So let's start with the basics. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It is incredibly broad because communications between all the different platforms in the DoD that are out there having to execute their mission has become so central. No longer is it a single platoon or a flight of aircraft out operating alone and unafraid. The B-52 might be streaking across the Pacific in the middle of the night and need to coordinate with the Navy F-8 as well as the Marines on the ground to go effect a mission. And so the networks that stitch all these platforms together is where we're focused. Fuse is all about putting easy to use networks into aircraft and platforms so they can communicate, whether it's search and rescue or ISR or some sort of a kinetic effect. So we build these network systems out of lots of different radios and work to make them easy to use.
Interesting. And what got you into that?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that's interesting is when you look at these networks, it's very complicated technology. And you have Cisco engineers and Juniper engineers and all these engineers that have to build these networks. And when you put that into a military platform, you don't have engineers. Even on the largest aircraft, you don't have network engineers that have to focus on this stuff. The pilots have to do it all. And so it's really hard to use. And many times the networks just don't work right. And my history was flying the H-46 helicopter for the Navy. It was one of the oldest and least technologically advanced aircraft ever, to the point where with the GPS, it was a handheld GPS, and I literally had to stick my arm out the window for the GPS to acquire the satellites, because the cockpit would block the signals. And so I went from that experience of using no tech into SBIR, now NavWar, and learning about technology and trying to figure out how do you pull together this operational need for simplicity with all this advanced technology. So I founded Fuse because having that operational experience and having a design background and having worked in the design world a little bit as well, I felt that applying the best practices of design thinking to these Navy technology problems could make a real difference. We're a company that has used Small Business Innovative Research, SBIR, to be able to develop solutions that are actually being fielded. We've gone through a small number of SBIR contracts, just 7 contracts that have turned into 12 different phase 2 contracts and into 5 different transitioned phase 3 contracts. And so we build these complicated network systems to go into the aircraft that you can install and utilize and get communications with the broad enterprise of platforms if you're in a complicated mission.
Well, first of all, congratulations. That's kind of a unicorn in the land of SBIRs, is getting so far from phase 1 into phase 2s, and then to have so many transition into what's referred to as phase 3s, which most of us know. If the audience doesn't know, that's where you're out of SBIR funding, you're into some sort of programmatic funding, whether it's program of record funding, it's just you're out of that SBIR funding. So congratulations on that. But I'm curious. There's been a lot of shade that I feel like has been thrown at the SBIR program, and I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about the SBIR program as a whole. And it sounds like you didn't really start in the system integration business, and you didn't necessarily start where you're at the beginning of these big aircraft projects and you're being thought of from the beginning. So what's your experience been being a plug and play and kind of a build in, not along with sort of product?
Yeah, the SBIR program is under attack from multiple sides right now. Yeah. It's a fascinating story in Congress right now with factions that are saying, nope, we want to get rid of SBIR because there's all sorts of abuse of the program. And there's these SBIR houses that have 100 phase 1 SBIRs and they transition 1% of what they do. And I agree. no program in the entire government is perfect. And the SBIR program has plenty of warts like every other, but I think that there are some real diamonds in the SBIR program. I think there's some things about SBIR that can be really effective at taking basic ideas and creative, dynamic concepts and pushing them into those established programs. And so you mentioned the fact that we're not baked in at the early design phase of the newest fighter jet or the latest unmanned aircraft, but SBIR lets these large programs reach down into technology pockets that come from small business and from innovative ideas and pull them up. And so while there's lots of SBIR factories out there, there are also some real diamonds that have been able to transition forward. I'm kind of proud about the fact that we have been able to do that by taking this operational expertise, by pulling in the aviators and the pilots, by pulling in the operators and getting them to really drive the design, development, and test. We've then been able to effectively transition. And so some of the things that really have helped us with that transition and getting into those phase threes and being installed on the E2 and on B-52 and B-1 and these other platforms has been that we work really closely with the warfighter. And we're constantly talking, discussing, shaping, pulling them into our labs, going out and doing tests with them on site and in the air and at exercises. And for me, I really believe that that's been the big difference in going from technology that goes through a phase one development and is a lab test and ends to a technology that gets adopted by the platform and then picked up by the program of record.
Now, I feel like that's rare. You don't find folks that are often able to say, yeah, we pull in the end user. We've got a lot of end user feedback and input, and I don't necessarily know why that is. I think it sounds easier, obviously, than it is to get folks to take a break and to come work and give you input and provide feedback in the labs. But are you co-located next to some Air Force or Navy folks, or are you how do you get them in there?
So we're located in San Diego, so the largest hub of the US Navy on the Pacific, other than Hawaii. And so we have a distinct advantage of being able to literally walk down the street and go to North Island to go and sit down with the helicopter squadrons, go down to the amphibious base, go see special warfare, be able to go walk onto the amphibious assault ships or the cruisers and destroyers. So that's a huge advantage. The second unfair advantage that I leverage as much as possible is bringing in veterans to be program managers, to be project managers, and to help drive the organization of our products and projects. And that is a second totally unfair advantage, right? And as a small business, I'll leverage every unfair advantage I can get, right?
Absolutely.
Because I'm fighting against the Lockheeds and the Boeings and the Northrops that have billions of dollars of IRAD, and I'm putting together a few shekels from my pocket with the SBIR funds to be able to go and make things happen and to go get shit done. So by pulling in veterans who understand the real needs of the warfighter, who understand how the platforms work together, that's where we can really connect. And that connection, that human connection, is really what is so important. Being able to communicate in the same words and communicate about the mission and understand how this technology overlay can make a difference in what they're doing. I've got another example that's kind of interesting of, the valley of death that you hit. It's hard to get started, right? Somebody with a great idea who doesn't understand military operations is going to have a really tough time getting anywhere. So that's the first valley of death, or the first hurdle. The second valley of death is transition from development and test into an actual program. And there's a distinct valley right there, even when you get through SBIR funded initial development. And that second valley of death is that you've got to be able to work through building advocates inside the program offices. And we have an application called T3, where we connected with the warfighter, the JICOs, who are the sailors who command, develop, and deploy the networks on the ships. They were beating the table saying, we want T3. This lets us understand what our distributed platforms are doing. It lets us see the network on a common operational picture. And the program office just passed on it and pushed it off and said no thanks. And so it's been interesting, even while we have multiple network products for aircraft that have transitioned. We've also seen our own struggles of trying to take some of the software forward that's been very difficult to transition forward.
Now, one of the things in the SBIR program that's becoming more notable is that there's a really strong drive and push towards what's called dual use technologies. They want folks to have things that are commercialized or commercializable and that have kind of proven themselves in the outside market before coming back in and re-entering the Department of War, Department of Defense sort of market, if you will, these days. Do you consider your products dual use?
Yeah, our products are definitely dual use. However, you get to a level of security that is no longer applicable for commercial systems. Our technology is really based on a lot of commercial capabilities for networks, and we are applying a lot of that tech into our systems we take into military platforms, aircraft, or unmanned systems. What's interesting is that there's a lot of value in pulling in all this commercial capability, but then it's got to be adapted. It's got to be tweaked. There are different security requirements. There are different protocols. There's different types of data, and there's significantly different latency and timeliness needs from the government systems. And so we've been able to leverage the mixed use functionality. And I love where the Department of War is taking acquisition right now. The new guidance that's coming out about accelerated acquisition using dual use technology, combining and smashing together the commercial systems with military systems to be able to end up with secure, resilient networks and applications that work for the warfighter, I think it's really exciting. I hope that SBIR stays in that world of driving big ideas from small companies into government technology. And I think it's very much aligned with the Department of War's vision for how to make acquisition move faster and be smarter.
And it seems like you've been able to leverage the program to do something that not a lot of companies can, which is take it from prototype into operational technology. Is that something that you feel like you've been successful at? And what do you feel like are the keys that have helped you unlock that success?
That transition from research and development to experimentation and test into initial fielding and then into support is this really fun life cycle for me. And so, yeah, we're at this point at Fuse right now. It's really exciting for me because we are starting to deploy to fleet squadrons and to fleet ships more and more all the time, which means that we get that much more time sitting down and working with the sailors and the aviators. And the real secret to making that transition is coming back to keeping the user at the middle of everything you're doing. And I think that we've been successful in taking some 7 SBIRs to 5 phase 3s, these fielded programs, because we are always pulling the user into the environment of development, test, experimentation, and fielding. We force the program offices to give us access to the users. That's why I've got veterans who are my program managers, because they can go call their buddies who are now the squadron commanding officers or the ship combat system officer and say, hey, I need to come talk to you about how this really works. And so we've used that more times than we should, I'm sure, where a program office says, whoa, I want to control your access to the ship or to the squadron. And we end up having to go directly to relationships so that those relationships can then pull together to get the right answers into the systems.
So leveraging relationships and making sure that you've got constant touch points with the customer is would you say that that's a differentiator?
You know, every business school you go to will tell you that you've got to stay connected. You've got to be in relationships with your customers. And it is so simple, but it is hard, and it is absolutely true. And so I think one differentiator for us is that we harp on that consistently, and we leverage that consistently, and we build an environment inside Fuse that celebrates that connection all the time. We are doing Warfighter workshops where we're sitting down and bringing all of our ideas and technology into these workshops that are in the location of the warfighters. We're bringing warfighters in to do speaker series inside Fuse on our Friday lunches. And so I'm constantly trying to take our brilliant engineers that have all this tech understanding and force feed them the legacy operations of how these aviators have to operate, because it's very different than just picking up your cell phone and getting on the latest app for video or for text or whatever, because the systems inside the aircraft are legacy and constrained, and you can't just add new apps to what you're doing inside a fighter jet. You've got to be able to fit within the rules. And so by forcing the technologists and the engineers to understand those rules, I think that's helped make us successful.
Interesting. And what are some of the other challenges that you've had and lessons that you've learned from those challenges?
Gosh, some of those challenges are breakdown in communication between the developmental squadrons, the developmental teams, and then the programs driving forward, right? That the valley of death that I mentioned earlier is real and palpable. And so whether it's a pod you're going to hang on the wing end of an aircraft, or software you're going to put in a ship, or a system you're putting inside an aircraft, you might expect that the Pentagon and the program office and the fleet squadrons are all talking to each other. But in reality, half the time they're talking past each other. They each have their own view of what this new tech might be, and the views are totally different. And so I've got this great example of the first time, actually just recently, just this year, we put a pod on a Navy aircraft, and we kept telling them, here's what it's going to give you. It's going to give you secure networks. It's going to give you access to SBIRnet. It's going to give you all these things. And the pilots kind of said, yeah. And the program office said, okay, just do the tech. And they went up for their first flight. And the pilots came back from the first flight and they said, oh my God, you gave us access to this data source that we never thought we would ever had. Why didn't you tell us about this? And it was just the funniest thing, because we'd been talking about access to SBIRnet, and until they got in the aircraft, until they sat with the new tech and played with it in their environment, they didn't even understand what they were getting. And so it's just this example of how people can talk past each other as you're going through development, transition, and then deployment. And until you're actually sitting there in the aircraft, in the warfighting environment, you're going to totally miss some of the nuanced capabilities that can come from all these networks. I think that right now, if you look at the battlefield, ISR is collaborative. If you're trying to look for the bad guy as a needle in the haystack, you have to have satellites in space. You have to have aircraft that are looking with all sorts of sensors, and you have to have guys and gals on the ground or on the surface. And together you can go find that needle in the haystack. When you're looking at command and control, you have to be able to communicate across all these ships, aircraft, tanks, platoons on the ground. And then if you're trying to go and affect a kill chain, you've got to keep them stitched together at critical times with just millisecond latency. And so what happens is everybody gets used to their cell phone keeping them connected all the time. And when you're working across a mix of advanced 6th generation fighters with 5th generation and 4th generation platforms, you get into hurdles and blockages that get in the way. And so the key for us is to build networks that are easy to bridge across these different things, whether they're legacy systems or advanced systems.
It sounds like there's a lot going on, especially with your interactions with the warfighter, with the end user, and kind of trying to navigate that sometimes tenuous relationship between the end user and the program offices that are responsible for procuring for the end user. What's an average day look like for somebody like yourself who's developing leading tech for the military?
Gosh, as I think about my job, as I look at what I'm supposed to be doing to help drive multiple programs. We're a small business. We're just over 100 people. We've got 3 major product areas. And so we've got multiple projects going on. So my job is to maintain that connection to the customers and the program offices. And so one of the things that I think is really important for me and for my program managers is to maintain the constant drumbeat of communications. Constantly just calling the program manager and saying, hey, what are your biggest challenges this week? What kind of things can I be helping to move along forward? I've got a team of engineers who are developing the solution, and I'm constantly looking at, okay, what are the big hurdles coming forward for the program? And then at the same time, how am I bringing the aviators, the warfighters, pilots and aircrew into those problems? How can I pull them along where the program office might have some acquisition and contract hurdles that they get completely distracted on? One of my biggest jobs is to ensure that we don't forget about pulling in the squadron commanders and the test pilots into what we're doing so that we can keep that triangle of communications going. And so the important thing for me is to smash and glue these different organizations together. And that's actually what's really fun for me as well. I really love when we get into the execution of test, because I try to make a big deal out of our tests and our demonstrations and the big exercises we go to, because if you can go get advocacy from the Pentagon, from the program office, and then also from the MAGCOMs, that if you're out in PAC Fleet or out in CENTCOM, then you're pulling in advocates who then can make sure that the vector you're on is the right vector to deliver the right tech to the right place. And that's what really matters, right? Is getting your systems in the hands of the warfighter so that they can actually have an easier time doing their job and save lives.
Absolutely. And a lot of folks, I think, are looking more towards these big exercises, these big activities, these big sort of collaborative events to be able to go out and show that their technology is what they say it is and is sort of going along the right lines to be developed for the use and like adoption by the warfighter. But there's some companies that I have noticed have kind of a harder time getting to these events. They when they get there, they may not have thought through all of like the logistic. I mean, it can be as simple as like, we forgot to bring an extra power cord or ask for like the router that we need because we just figured it would exist. We figured it would be there for us. Is that something that you've experienced, or what's your experience been like going into some of these bigger exercises?
Oh my God, every single time. There will always be the power cord that doesn't exist, or the most recent one. I mean, that literally happens every single time. We go to Alaska. Oh, no, we got to ship something else up there. Quick, go get it on a plane. We go to the middle of the Mojave Desert. Oh, nope, wait a second. I mean, I've got so many stories of stuff breaking that you really didn't expect to break at all, and you got to scramble and go get something new. I mean, the Mojave Desert one, we're out there to go test on some unmanned aircraft, and literally the hangar where we were in blew down. It ripped open. It was a fabric temporary hangar, and it blew down and ripped open. Oh my God. So then we basically did an audible and took our system down to our own test aircraft so we could still do the flying down in San Diego. So we had to scrap that one. That was a massive change. You know, we had another one just this last August. We're an event, and we go and we have to run this radio antenna cable up to the roof because we have our deployable kits down in this secure space, and we're running up to the roof, and literally the tip of this stupid cable breaks, and it's 100-foot cable, and we're like, oh my God, where do we get a 100-foot cable? Oh my God, we got to go buy, and we got guys running around to go and source a 100-foot cable that night, so the next morning we could go rerun a second cable and get it out there. And so the point is that, yeah, you go to these exercises and they're awesome, but they're these massive events. There's 100 Navy and joint aircraft flying in the event. Yep. So when you're one of 50 demonstrations, the Navy says, yes, we can't wait to see your demo. That's so great. But I can't deal with your problems. Go fix your problems. And so you have to totally be ready to do it yourself. Absolutely. So as a small business, and this is where having those operators having some operational understanding of, hey, wait a second, you can't go bug the squadron. They're doing flight planning. They're planning a mission. They're looking at where they're going to go drop bombs. I've got to go make sure I've got my own team sourcing the beans, bullets, and Band-Aids for myself. Yeah. Right? Sourcing the extra power supply and the batteries, getting ready to put a tent up so it doesn't rain on our stuff because it's open and we're doing some experimentation. You got to bring your own easy up tent. And don't forget the sandbags because it's probably going to blow over in the wind since you're on the beach. And then make sure you got coffee for everybody because you're 15 miles out in the middle of the desert. You know, all these little things. Absolutely. Right. So you've got to be very self-sufficient to be able to make it in the DoD environment, which is probably a good thing, right? You don't want systems coming from developers who don't understand the importance of resiliency. You've got to make sure that your products can survive in really harsh environments, whether it's the middle of the jungle or out on the open ocean or in an aircraft that's at 40,000 feet. So you got to be able to be resilient yourself so you can build resilient solutions.
I love that. That's a fantastic sort of closing statement for this conversation, which has been absolutely enlightening. You've come much farther than I've seen most companies go in the SBIR program, and it seems like you've really got the stay and the mentality to have that stay in this industry. So I think folks are going to learn a ton from this episode. Not only that, but I'm sure that they're going to be beating down your door for a job here soon. So get ready.
We try to have fun at Fuse. We get out there. I force the software engineers out into the desert as often as I can. We've got 3 guys I sent on a Navy ship for the first time in their lives, probably only time in their lives, but they loved it. And I think that's a great point. Resiliency of your team equates to the resiliency of your systems, which is what the warfighters really need to be able to get the job done. So thank you, Chelsea. It's been wonderful to chat.
Absolutely. And for folks that want to get a hold of you or folks that want to learn more about Fuse, how do they do that?
Yeah, so online, we're at fuseintegration.com. So very simple to reach out to us there, learn more about our products and solutions, and also reach out whether you're a brilliant engineer who wants to actually roll up their sleeves and gets their hands dirty on tech in the field, or if you're somebody who has a network problem and you want to interconnect legacy platforms with advanced future tech, then reach on out at fuseintegration.com.
Fantastic, Sumner. This has been a great conversation. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Chelsea.
And for everybody else, thanks for listening this week to GovCon Unscripted. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you got time, maybe leave a comment in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Appreciate your time, guys. Thanks.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.